This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hey folks, welcome into another edition of Rhode Island's podcast of record, the Bartholomew Town Podcast. It's Bill Bartholomew here with you. Always a pleasure to spend some time together as you listen through your earbuds out of your iPhone at work or in your car, whatever it may be. Even on Alexa, all you have to do is say, Alexa or Siri, whatever. Play Bartholomew Town. You should be able to get this show. Today we're going to talk about something that I think is highly relevant right now in our state, and that is the creation of the Department of Labor and Training's Virtual Career Center with Sarah Blusiewicz. Now, as the pandemic restrictions come to a close here in Rhode Island, and as basically workplaces and workforces are kind of adapting to the new normal, quote unquote, right? We hear this constant complaint of people saying, hey, you know, I own a restaurant, I own X retail business, whatever it may be. Not only retail or public-facing companies, but I think a number of sectors are facing what I'm about to describe. But I can't get employees because the employees making more money on unemployment plus the $300 than they would if they came back. So they're saying, I'd rather not work. And, I think that's just such a false narrative. First of all, if you're making more on unemployment, even including the $300 per week bonus than you were at your job, and you're able to take better care of yourself and your family, you should not feel ashamed about that. That is absolutely ridiculous and pitiful. And that is you looking out for yourself. And if you've gotten accustomed to living at a certain level, which is still probably scraping by for many of you, you shouldn't have to turn that back just because the workforce has made an adjustment and is, quote unquote, counting on you to return. I think the appropriate thing to do is to incentivize people through better wages and better compensation as a whole. I mean, look, in 2015, I worked at a Michelin star restaurant in New York where there were no tips, none of that nonsense. People got paid like $30 an hour. Everyone showed up, everyone wanted shifts, and at the end of the day, you did pretty well if you showed up to work in that service industry, including the restaurant. They didn't have really any staffing problems. The kitchen staff, everybody did well and was paid a living wage. And as a result, I think the entire vibe and the entire system from top to bottom worked in a better manner. But at the very least right now, this notion of, someone's lazy, they don't want to work if they don't want to go back to work because they're making, too much money on the unemployment. Enough of that garbage, man. Enough of that garbage. That's ridiculous. If you have a business and you can't pay people a living wage, then you have to ask yourself certain questions, significant questions about what sort of compensation am I providing? Why would someone choose to not return to employment in my business or in my sector? Is it entirely compensation? Is it workplace environment? What are the different factors? So that's one piece of it. But that's going to end in September at the absolute latest. The $300 per week bonus, the pandemic-related unemployment insurance, all that is going to come to an end. In the short term, I don't hold it against anybody who says, you know what, I don't want to go back. I'm making more right now than I would laboring for somebody else in poverty wages or just above that. But if you want to look down the line, if you want to look towards the future and you were in a situation or you are currently in a situation where either you are extremely dissatisfied with your job from a compensation perspective or any other reason, or you're looking ahead and you say, you know what, my particular industry has shifted so much so that my job is either not there now or will probably never come back. Well, the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training has created the Virtual Career Center. This is an opportunity for people to start looking for work in fields that are in a growth moment, where compensation is far better, perhaps, than what you were making previously. And I think it's a great opportunity for people to revisit the skills that they may have sort of buried deep down inside them or that they want to acquire, and sort of get out in front of the trend when the unemployment ends or just when, frankly, people realize they want a career shift. So the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training here has created this virtual career center, the VCC, and that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. And I think it's well worth your time to investigate this at minimum or spread the word if you're in a situation where you, for any number of reasons, are dissatisfied with the opportunities you have in front of you from a career perspective, or from just frankly, your job went away during the pandemic and it's not coming back, or your job before the pandemic had unacceptable wages or other scenarios or compensation that went beyond wages, and you need to make an adjustment. So here's your opportunity. We're going to go over it together today on B-Town. It's the VCC, the Virtual Career Center, with the DLT's Sarah Blusiewicz, right here on Rhode Island's podcast of record, the Bartholomew Town Podcast, which you may support by visiting patreon.com/BartholomewTown. For as little as $3 a month, that is, patreon.com/BartholomewTown. Today, we're going to talk about very specifically the VCC. That's not a college basketball team. That's the Virtual Career Center. And just generally speaking, one of the things that really came up during COVID-19 was something that's been going on since really the aughts, as iPhones came in, the first financial crisis in 2008, the shifting workforce. And really, as people started to lose their jobs from shutdowns and other factors during COVID, a lot of people were, number one, they were faced with the possibility that their job would never return. And also, I think a lot of people assess their situation, whether they're a freelancer, whether they're in a career that they didn't particularly like or were particularly susceptible to the changing environment, and said, you know what, I'm ready for a change. And we can all remember, well, those of us that paid attention can remember Governor Raimondo coming out and saying, look, we're doing everything we can on a job training, in a job training context to try to get people back to work. So today we welcome, we'll get right into it. I guess introduce yourself and let's talk about virtual career training and where the workforce is heading here in Rhode Island.
Sure. Well, good morning. My name is Sarah Blusiewicz, and I'm the Assistant Director of Workforce Development at the Department of Labor and Training. So VCC, Virtual Career Center, has been something we have been working on for several months, because as soon as the pandemic hit, we were immediately recognizing how a lot of jobs were going to, if they came back, were going to look significantly different than what they were pre-pandemic. And we knew that labor force issue around, well, how are people going to connect with new jobs? What do new jobs even look like in a post-pandemic world? And how are we going to get information into the hands of people with a virtual setting? Because we knew even our own offices had been disrupted by COVID. So in my department, we oversee 4 local career centers in West Warwick, Woonsocket, Wakefield, and Providence. And we were a completely in-person setting. So you would come in, we had a resource lab. You could, type up your resume if you wanted. You could meet with a career counselor, but everything was walk-in or appointment-based, and you met with someone face-to-face. You sat in their cubicle, so social distancing was not a thing. And so we quickly realized, as our own offices had closed to the public, because we needed to re-engineer on how do we set up our offices to be safe settings for folks to come in, that we're going to need to move to to have something available for folks virtually. And then in addition, how do you make a virtual experience both personal and something that can help drive job searching in a way that's not just sort of looking at the abyss of Google results on, the endless number of job boards where there's thousands and thousands of openings, and a person, job searching is not fun, typically speaking. So a lot of times it's very overwhelming. How do you sort through that? The job classes are all called something different. And is it the right kind of employer for me? I'm like, but then you hear on the news that local employers are trying to find workers, and you're like, but where's your hire here sign at? And I don't know how to. So you have employers who are looking for good Rhode Islanders for their jobs. You have great Rhode Islanders who offer a lot of talent, looking for great opportunity. And so our thought was, how do we make that connection a lot more easy for folks to accomplish on the VCC? And so working with Google, Wave, and Ripple, Research Improving People's Lives, we're really trying to crack that nut. So that's what the VCC is really trying to do.
Yeah, it's presenting opportunities, because career shifts of any stripe are extremely challenging mentally. They can be, as you mentioned, onerous, and the process isn't always particularly enjoyable. And when we see this technological divide, now this isn't to say that, oh, well, if you're over the age of 57, you're likely not going to be able to navigate Indeed or something like that. But let's be real. There are lots of people who they're facing a situation where they're not ready for retirement, not even close. They want to stay in the labor force, but at the same time, they may not be as adept at using some of the platforms that someone who is 21 kind of entering the labor force would be able to do. So does this sort of close that gap in terms of just making it simpler for people to be able to target what they're looking to do?
That is the intention. So we've been really focused on the customer use experience. And I would even argue that the 21-year-old, the ability to navigate some of those platforms is not super helpful if the platform is only generating, again, overwhelming amounts of results that are not super useful. And how many 21-year-olds do we all know that are coming out of college or out of high school? And then it's just apply, and I submit, 100 job resumes, 100 applications on this site, and then you get maybe one call back if you're lucky, and then do you even get the interview? So for us, it was really around, yes, we want that welcoming page. And when we were doing user acceptance testing, our greatest compliment was that our VCC site did not look like a government web page. And we thought that was the highest praise any customer could give us, because we know the reputation that government websites tend to be clunky and overwhelming with lots of information and can be difficult to find, what you're looking for. So VCC is very simple laid out. The idea is, you can look for work yourself. And then what's really neat is we have the career compass. So the idea for that is it's a recommendation engine. So we have a lot of information at the Department of Labor about people and where do they work and where do people like them also work. And if they've been unemployed and went back to work, what does that transition look like? What kind of jobs do people successfully transition into? And so we use that information behind the scenes to then generate some career recommendations for the person using the VCC to say, hey, out of everything that's happening sort of in these job banks or, with you as a job seeker, if you have a resume, upload it, it scrapes information off of that resume, and then it crunches the numbers to say, well, hey, based on where you're coming from, based on some of the skills that we see in your resume, here are some careers and some trajectories that might be appealing to you. So again, this is new technology, so we're very excited because no other state has this yet, and it's very preliminary. But the idea is it's machine learning based, so the more that people use it, they rate, and there's a rating system. Yes, I like that, or no, actually that doesn't really suit me. All that feedback as people are liking thumbs up, thumbs down jobs or career pathways or whatever, then that goes back into the algorithm, and then the machine learning actually enhances itself based on the amount of feedback that users are giving it. So as you use it, we recommend that, come back frequently because new jobs are open. That will give you that job placement recommendation. More users, as they come online and use it, the feedback gets better. So I even tried it myself because I'm like, well, if I'm going to tout this on, podcasts and interviews and things like that, I should know what my career recommendations would be if I'm an out of work Rhode Islander. And it actually came back, and I'll give you a good example of, it did say, a lot of, I work for the government. So obviously I had a lot of, government liaison or, some budgeting or some executive work. Now it did also recommend some administrative support roles. That was not a good recommendation for me, but I could understand we use the term administrator and administrative interchangeably in the labor market. So I want to preface for folks, you might see a little bit of a one-off where, again, we're refining as we go on that stuff. But the idea is that at least it gives you a starting point where you could see real companies in Rhode Island who are actually hiring for things that you may have a skill set in. And again, it's a starting point. It's a way to say, don't look at, 10,000 search results at once. Let's start with somewhere where we think, based on information that we have, you might see some success right out of the gate. So our thought here is, how do we make this an efficient process for both the employer user and the job seeker user to say, hey, if you're posting a job and you want to find a Rhode Islander and you, a Rhode Islander, are looking for a job, how do we make sure that you can get that the best choice to be in front of you rather than having every choice being equally presented? And then I think that another really good aspect of the VCC that makes it different than, say, the Indeeds and the Monster.coms is we actually have connected all of the job coaches. So one thing that we hear a lot about technology is you're like, but I just want to talk to a person. So can I talk to a person? There's a lot going on right here. And in unemployment, one thing that is very, sometimes overlooked is that losing a job is a grieving process for, our work is so much a part of who we are, right? What do you do? What is your passion? You spend hours and hours and hours doing this work. And so now that that's shifted, that really, you have to go through a grieving process around like, okay, well, what's my next step? And is it similar to that? Is it a new identity for me? And so there can be a very daunting task to like take on, okay, where am I going from here and how am I going to get there? And so we really wanted to infuse a personal touch. So anyone who's on the VCC, in addition, you can use the algorithm, the Career Compass recommendations, you can look at the job board, but you can also connect with a job coach. Now, who are job coaches and what do they do? So job coaches are both my staff who work at the in-person career centers that we have around the state, but it's also several other organizations. We have higher education representatives on there. We have, some nonprofits and local community-based organizations. Progressive Latino is on there. So the idea is all of our collective organizations are in the business of helping people navigate this kind of change. So it's around, what do you want to do? What is your family situation? And what do you need out of your new career? And, is it just going straight back to work? Or is this an opportunity to maybe get additional education or finish what you started at a higher education institution? We have a lot of people who might have, been partway through a degree. And, is there a scholarship program or something where it could be a work and school fit for them to launch them into something different? We have a lot of short-term training. So a lot of people have been seeing, on the news and in different places, hey, we're training people to be welders. We're training people to be process technicians. Like, what is that? And like, is that something that's a good fit for me? So the idea is that job coach can be that in-person resource to help you sort through that stuff. So we wanted to create both an online platform that made an online experience easier and more efficient for folks, but we also really wanted to make sure that in-person element wasn't lost when we moved to online services. So that's where, again, that job coach and language, I also want to make sure that language is not a barrier. So for all of our services, interpreter is part of what we provide. So don't feel like just because, English might not be your first language, that this is a closed door and you can't meet with someone. We encourage any Rhode Islander who is in this position, if you want to talk to somebody, we're here and we want to help. So I would just, encourage that for no one to be daunted by the fact that it's online. We wanted it to be easy to use, but we really wanted to infuse that in-person appointment element because we know so many times in government and a lot of agencies, there's a reputation of, they just send you to a queue. They just send you to a form. You never get through. You don't ever get to talk to anybody. And for at least on the job coaching side, we do want you to be able to talk to someone. And we want you to talk to someone who's a good fit for you.
It's the summer concert event of the season.
All right, relax. But it's going to be a good time, that's for sure.
Friday, June 18th, Bill Bartholomew, full band, outdoors at dusk. Providence, Rhode Island. New songs, new lineup, new normal.
That's great stuff. And I mean, obviously, Rhode Island is positioning itself as potentially the leader, if not a leader, globally in the blue economy. We see Orsted, Revolution Wind here. And obviously things are moving in terms of our ports, in terms of smart bay and sensors. There's a whole world of new jobs that are opening just in that one sector. And you have to think that some people would be potentially, not only is there is a grieving process from losing a previous job, but there may be an excitement to say, wow, I'm now moving towards something that is more interesting, more contemporary, more in moving towards the future. And I would assume that the job coach would help guide someone's morale as well as, sort of almost like a life coach in that moment to say, hey, look, you can actually come home making more money and feeling better about your long-term future in an industry that may otherwise have been sort of on the brink of consolidation or overall collapse in some cases.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say that one of the biggest things that with a job coach or the career recommendation engine, things like that, is around, a lot of times you only know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. So There are so many exciting opportunities in Rhode Island's economy that I find that unless you have someone who's worked in that industry or, you've seen it firsthand, you might not know it exists there. And I think about it because some of our job training folks, when you talk to them, they're quick to say, I drove past this building for years and I never knew that that's what was inside of it. So there are a lot of, and I think of our manufacturers are a great way of that. A lot of people have a stereotypical idea around when you say manufacturing, they're thinking like, ooh, like, I don't know, that sounds like that's going to be like, on a dirty machine floor and I'm going to have to do like all this presses. And, you think like, like it's like 1919 or something with manufacturing. Manufacturing is one of the most sophisticated industries that we have in Rhode Island. It's very clean. It's a bright environment to work in, a lot of computer aided technology. So it's very cutting edge. And then you get to see like the production of things that people hear about. Like we make like military blankets that, if you have a family member or a friend who's in the military, some of their supplies comes from a Rhode Island based factory. We have, composite manufacturers in Rhode Island who build some of the amusement rides for like Universal Studios, for example. So if you ever gone on vacation in Florida with your friends, you might have ridden something that was built in Rhode Island. A lot of people don't know that that exists. And so a lot of it too is, again, like looking beyond sort of what might have been something that your own circle of acquaintances might be exposed to. There could be a whole host of other jobs in the state that you might not be aware of. And we want you to know about those. We want you because we need you. So I think that that's something people don't also, like, they don't think about that very often around, is that, your economy needs you. Like, you are an important resource. Like, people can't build things. They can't, the hospitality industry is going through a bit of a transition right now, but they need their workforce. And their workforce might look slightly different post-pandemic, but every Rhode Islander has a place in Rhode Island's economy, and they are needed and they are wanted. And so it's our job is, okay, how do we make those connections and how do we speed that up? So someone who is really needed by an employer or really needed in their economy is not struggling to find where that new place is because of poor technology or because of inefficient solutions for them. So that's really, I think, it's that desire of, we really want people to get back in the game. They want to get back in the game. The employers want them in the game. And so we need to make sure we have the right tools to make that happen, because that's the biggest detriment to everyone, is if the connecting spaces are not up to par, and then people lose out on timing because, we couldn't figure out a good internet site, or we couldn't figure out a good way to organize search results. That's no excuse.
Yeah, I love that every Rhode Islander has a place in Rhode Island's economy. I feel like that's your your bumper sticker or, the radio ad. So, you get some guy to say that in the deepest voice possible, you know what I mean? Get the soothing music behind it, But I realize this is a new initiative, but what's some of the early feedback that you've gotten? Or, it's unfair to say, well, tell us about the success stories, or whatever, because we're like a month or so into this thing. But what's the early feedback, even from a user standpoint, even from a beta testing standpoint?
So early feedback, it was easy to use. It did what I thought it was going to do. We had folks, we do federated login, so you don't need you can log in with your Google account, for example. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of times folks are just like, another password, and like, this is so boring. Like, I mean, I get it.
That would be
I know.
me. Yeah.
We work in government. We hear it. So the idea is we wanted it to be something where it felt familiar. Like, it should not be, when you come to the VCC, it should not be like, oh God, here's another one of them weird government forms. I've got to fill out all this stuff, and it's going to be 3 hours of my life I'm never getting back. Yeah. I know that experience. I also, not only as a government worker, but also as a government consumer, I understand that frustration. So for us, it was really around, we wanted this to feel like a website that, one, was easy to use, easy to navigate, and actually got you what you wanted. So for our user testings, it was, they like the clean, they're like, this layout is clean. I click on something and it actually takes me to what I want to see, not sort of another weird 3 clicks deep is then when I get to where I want to go. And then the scheduling. So one thing that we really worked on was, it's very hard in an in-person environment, unless you have like sort of a full-time secretary staff, is to say, well, hey, I have any combination of job seekers and any combination of job coaches. How do you schedule appointments without someone having to call and say, hey, I want an appointment? So we really worked on getting that scheduling technology where when you come through as a user, you actually see real-time availability for that job coach. So you can just click, oh, I want the Tuesday 9 o'clock appointment. You hit click, it's booked. Like, that person will be on the other side of that meeting, and you don't have to call, you don't have to like wait in a queue or anything like that. So we really wanted that, just like when you go to take your car for an oil change, like you can then say, oh yeah, I want to take it on this time, and then they know to expect you and you're ready to come. We wanted that kind of customer experience in terms of, what are some of the best ideas that we have in terms of when you shop on Amazon, you can look for things and you get what you want. Or when you are going to schedule an unemployment insurance, we're working on what we call the pizza tracker. Like, people want to know, when I file a claim, where is that in the process? Because all I think about is it's in the abyss somewhere, and is it sitting on someone's desk and not being processed? Just more transparency into that process. And so that's what been some of the early user feedback has been. It's clean, it does what I think it's going to do, and I got what I want out of it, and it wasn't a hassle to use. So, and again, the highest compliment was that it doesn't look like a government website.
I love that. Spoken from someone inside state government right there, ladies and gentlemen. Sarah, this is great stuff, and it's so important. You know what I mean? And I know so many people that in particularly in the arts sector, the musicians, I'm worried about what it will look like, our creative sector, what that's going to look like in 2, 5, even 10 years as a result of the pandemic, because I think a lot of people are going to shift careers. One thing that for the creative sector that sometimes is very important, some of our best musicians, artists, playwrights, whatever, is finding part-time work that can supplement what they're doing so that they can continue to create and continue to drive that huge engine of our economy. But then at the same time, oftentimes that's freelance or it doesn't pay very much at all, especially for musicians. I can attest to that from experience. But what about part-time work? Is that something that people can seek out if they're like, you know what, I learned from the pandemic that I can compartmentalize, work 2-3 days a week at a job or in a freelance capacity? Is that available?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So part-time work is just as valuable to our agency as full-time work is.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of employers who, and again, this is also where your small businesses come into play as well. So you have most of the business in Rhode Island is small, and a lot of small businesses are where you find those more creative work solutions, like, for example, part-time work or flexible hours, or, it's a local business. So, there's a lot of opportunity there. And so, and I also want to say that, even for some of the larger businesses, and even in the pandemic response work, I think about the substitute teacher shortage that we have right now. Mm-hmm. That's a great part-time job for folks because it's like, hey, you can pick your hours, you pick where you want to work. So there's a lot of opportunity, even in still while we're all kind of collectively, figuring out what sort of life after COVID is looking like. There's a lot of life with COVID right now that's generating a ton of work in healthcare and education, and even other businesses as they, the screeners and the testers and all of that kind of work. There's a lot of part-time, work that's out there that's super necessary. So I would definitely encourage, this is just as useful for a part-time work seeker as it is for a full-time work seeker. And I think that, that creativity, and to the creative industry, I want to say personally, like, we do value them. So I know we hear a lot about manufacturing and, the construction trades and healthcare and some of those, those bigger ones. But, the culture and arts is the soul of our state. So that is a recognized industry of being an in-demand industry for Rhode Island. And we do want to make sure that that group is supported and valued because what good is having a state that has no soul? So I think that, I just want to make sure folks realize that this is not just for some of your big three sectors that, everybody hears about on the news. This is for the small business owner. This is for, the part-time job seeker. This is for that musician. And so we want to see people succeed. So that's the big takeaway, I think. And again, bear with us. We went from and I'll speak plainly, my staff did not have laptops with cameras or speakers a couple weeks ago. So we are doing a lot of, innovation in our own government to then be able to respond better to some of those custom issues that folks are having. So again, I'm very proud that we were able to stand up a piece of technology this large, this quickly, because normally in government, that would be probably a several-year project.
Yeah.
We did it in a couple weeks. So, but it's the first iteration, and we are constantly looking at, well, what's phase 2? What's phase 3? How do we make this better? We have a lot of, user feedback, tags in that website because we want to hear what's working, or, what, I had a hard time. Well, great. Like, we'll outreach to you and talk more through, like, well, what did you not like? What did you not see that you thought you would? So I just wanted to really state that this is our first step in the right direction, not our last step. And I think, one thing that just came online last week was the ability for employers to host job fairs. And recruitment events. So the idea is that we can have real life employers hosting meetings where you can get a 5 to 10 minute face-to-face with someone who is looking for, that worker or that part-time worker or that full-time worker. And then you can get in front of an employer directly. So we're really trying to build, how do we get the right job seekers in front of the right employers? So then that way we get straight to that hiring part, and there's not a lot of middlemen and middle websites like stuck there eating up time. So we really are trying to expedite, getting the right people in the right room to make that, that connection so people get back to work faster.
Last question, probably the most important or obvious one. How do people find the Virtual Career Center? What's the simplest way to get there?
So the easiest way to get there is backtoworkri.com. So it's right there. You can find it on the DLT website when it's part of our homepage banner. So it's easy to remember DLT, but backtoworkri.com takes you right there. And the homepage is it. So you don't have to dig for it. That website is the VCC. And you can start by either scrolling around, looking at some stuff, or if you want to say, hey, I actually just want to start with talking to that person, you don't have to do one thing to do the other. So you can jump right in and make an appointment. Or if you want to, look around, see what's out there on the site. And again, I just say, keep in mind, this is our first launch, but it's not, we're going to continue to enhance as we go. So, take a look, beat it up, give us feedback. We're here to help.
Rhode Island's podcast of record, B-Town.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.